It is plant-based chat time, and if you don't know who I am, I'm Kathy Hester, and you're in my kitchen. How could you not know that? It's not a Monday. Let's just deep Zen breath. Leslie and I just took a deep Zen breath together before we started this to come on, and we are super excited to have you here. I can't remember. I think I skipped doing a plant-based chat last week, but I don't remember, so you guys can tell me. So what plant-based chats are and how they're different from some of the other lives I do is basically I bring you all the cool people that I get to be friends with so you can be friends with them too. And one thing that's great, Leslie and I are actually in a blogger group together. So we're not really talking about what we know together. Hey Linda, it's awesome to see you, and I know you shared this in your group because some people have some chronic illnesses there as well, which is super cool. Mm-hmm. So Leslie has a food blog like I do, but she also has Navigate Advocate. And then what's your TikTok handle? Is it the same?
Oh, Lord, put me on the spot. You think I would know my own
That's
handle.
okay. I don't know mine.
This is my problem. This is my problem with social media is that I never get on it quickly enough to get the usernames I should have. So the one for my food blog is Stress Baking TikTok, and then the one that I kind of use more often is Leslie Saurus Rex. Because I have a thing about dinosaurs.
That is awesome. Well, I'm thinking with your last name, you could do a name as well. You know, so like
I had that for a while, and everybody kept misspelling it because my last name is Kiszka, and there's an S and a Z, and it's Polish, and nobody knows what to do with it. So I just gave up trying to use my last name and things.
Oh, that's awesome. So what I'm doing today is Leslie's coming on, and she's going to kind of talk about her experience with chronic illness, cooking, spoonfuls of energy, some of the same stuff we've been talking about. Like, I don't have a chronic illness per se, but when I feel like when I'm experiencing depression, anxiety, when it's up to X level, as the pandemic did, you know, certainly, like, I think in 2020, I came and hung out with you guys every day on a live, Monday through Friday. Sometimes I'd chop onions, sometimes I'd eat a sandwich, and we would just talk. And I think the general consensus was that everybody felt kind of blah, right? I think it kind of leveled the playing field for energy everywhere, or at least many places. And I think that now, I feel like I'm recovering a little bit. I think it's very tough going from that pandemic energy level up to normal, and like, do we even know what normal is anymore, right? I mean, I'm definitely reassessing a lot of things post-COVID. So I think even if you're watching this and you're not diagnosed with a chronic illness, I want to just to listen to see if you can pick up some tips and helpful things just for when you're super tired. So I'm going to let Leslie introduce herself, and then we can just start chatting with whatever you want.
Sounds good to me. Like I mentioned, I am Leslie Kiszka. That's my married name. My maiden name was not any easier because that one was German, so it was Hosh. Nobody got that right either. So I figured if I'm going to change it to something difficult, I might as well take my husband's name. I run a few sites now. So I run stressbaking.com, and I've had that since about 2014. I know that one's probably not going to be super relevant or helpful for the people in this general audience. There's lots of sweets, and I'm not paying a lot of attention to nutrition. Let's put it that way. But then I recently started another site called highproteinkitchen.com because I'm sure, as we'll talk about as part of my chronic illness journey, I'm having to drastically change my diet. Not that it wasn't healthy before, but it now just needs to change for the state of my condition. So high protein is what I'm looking at. So I figure there seems to be a bit of a miss on the internet in terms of an actual resource for those types of recipes that aren't just a giant roundup of like 6,000 things across the internet by allrecipes.com or something, So I'm hoping I can fill that gap a little bit. And then the chronic illness site that I have is called Navigate and Advocate, but the URL is navigateadvocate.com. And I'm just kind of going into my history with chronic illness, the way things have escalated and gotten way worse in the last 3 years, and just hoping that I can share information and tips, and then also get that back from other people in the community, because some of this is brand new to me. And a lot of it is old hat. So I've got a little bit of both going on there. And I'm just really opening up that community to hope that we can all share information and help each other, because I think, as many of us know, the medical community, at least in the US, is difficult to navigate. So I want to help navigate and then help everybody advocate for themselves.
I love that. And I think even though anybody here, like lots of our people are going to be on more high starch, high carbohydrate, low or no fat, low or no sugar or salt. And so even though, because Leslie's, I want to just, and I say this every time I do something you guys don't love to do too. Leslie's not trying to get you to go to her site stress baking at all. So just our to go high protein. No, none of that's trying to happen. So what we're talking about is her experience, what her doctors are saying, if we're talking about that. So let's just, so far everybody's being super lovely and saying hello, so you have nothing there. But I just like to go ahead and make that statement, because I find, just like I help vegan people and plant-based people make better food, if you're talking about chronic illness, it doesn't really matter what those people are eating, because they still may have the same energy level at certain parts of that diagnosis. And I know, because you are like mad focused when you do things.
Try to be. That's part of what's hit me so hard. It's just, the brain fog is terrible. So I've lost a lot of it.
Okay, so that's not my experience with you. So that's very interesting to know, because you don't really show that at all. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? Maybe some of the things, even how they affect you in your normal everyday life, or how they affect you with, and we don't have to bring everything back to the kitchen, but I'm just thinking, when you have a brain fog, when you're tired, you still have to eat. So but that doesn't mean there aren't other tips that you have that might be really awesome.
Yeah, for sure. So, and I probably should have included this in my intro, but so I've had endometriosis for almost 30 years. And then in the last 3 years, I have acquired a nice list of acronyms of various conditions. So now I have POTS, which is, I just want to say, probably the most generic of all of the diseases, because everything just gets thrown under POTS, and then you end up with comorbidities from that. So POTS is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. Oh, I got it right. And that causes me all sorts of problems, but it's mostly affecting my heart rate and ability to function like a normal human with any kind of energy level. Like I said, there's a ton more to it, but like that is the hardest hit thing for me. And the comorbidities that come with it are, and I'll never say it right, so I'm not even going to try, but it's ME/CFS, and the generic name is chronic fatigue syndrome, shocker, and then chronic pain syndrome and fibromyalgia. And so it's all a lot of taking my energy down, causing me a lot of pain, a lot of neuro symptoms, like nerve sensitivity, oh God, so many things. But the fatigue is huge, and the brain fog we were talking about is a big one for me, because I've always been a hyper-focused person. Like focusing on things has never been an issue. I'm wildly organized. I do have obsessive compulsive disorder. I've known that most of my life. But it's been the thing that's kind of propelled me through my career, because my day job is in engineering, and it's technical program management, which is basically organizing everything and herding all the cats. And you have to be hyper organized for that sort of thing. So that's always been very easy for me. So I've been very lucky that I've been able to, like, jump into new jobs and stuff doing that. And there's not a lot of downtime for me because it's like, cool, I just need to get people organized. Sounds good. And I can do that for myself, no problem. And I can do that for my husband, no problem. Now, the amount of energy it takes just to like decide this cane over here that I've had to use for the last couple days, to decide whether or not I want to bring that downstairs with me could take me a good few minutes, because I will get stuck in analysis paralysis. And that is not a thing that's ever happened to me.
Well, I think too, when you're, and I see what you're saying too, because I'm not diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure I'm ADHD because I get hyper focused. I'm either hyper focused or not. So I've learned to try and do my big project when I'm in this hyper focus. And I've always wished for someone like you to herd all the cats in my head. And I'm like, if someone else could just organize me. But I think how I feel, and again, it's not a one-to-one, but I'm trying to make sure I'm understanding, is like when I get out of that ADHD hyper focus, then I just feel everything pressing, and it's kind of like it's fuzzy, and it's like, well, do I do this? Do I do that? I don't know. I think I have to go to the bathroom, but could I wait? Like, it's like am I hungry? Do I need to pay a bill? It's like all these things jumble up, and whereas when I'm like hyper focused, everything goes away except for one or two things. And so it's a very clear path. Is that kind of how it feels when you have a
little bit. I actually published a post on Navigate Advocate recently because I was trying to explain this to people, and it took me a couple of weeks to write it because ironically, because of the brain fog. And it's
well,
about
duh.
fibro fog. Yeah, right? Like I'm a walking joke is what I am.
No, you have a good sense of humor, but you are not a joke. Let me assure you that. Because, like, I'm not kidding, and I want to go back to this again because I said this to you before. And so, in the group that I'm in, like, you've always been, I've known you since the beginning of January, so not a whole long time, but it's like you've been so concise and so precise with your information. I've always had immediate respect for how you think and how you think of things. So the reason I want to put this out there again is because I think whenever we don't feel like we're 100% and whatever we want to be 100%, I think we devalue ourselves. And it's one thing to have some brain fog and not be able to do what you're doing, but your value is still up here. And I want to tell you and everybody else and me, because like I'll get depressed and the first thing I think of is I'm worthless, I'm no good. And I think those are the voices. I was just talking in another group before this where we were saying women do tend to do that so much more. And wherever you are, even if you're just discovering why you don't have energy or things like that, I think the thing is try to hang on to, I'm an awesome person. And Leslie, you are an awesome person.
Oh, shucks. So when we have our group sessions together, that's what, like an hour and a half each week. Um, oh God, I don't know if I should say this. I usually, because it's on Monday mornings, my time, and I have to prepare myself for that hour and a half of like social interaction and doing a thing and being focused and all that. Usually by spending all of Sunday in bed, and then sometimes also Saturday, depending on how bad I'm feeling on Saturday. Because by the time I get to the end of my work week, which is like, I don't know, 60 hours or whatever, I'm exhausted. And most of the time I have to take time off during the week too, because it just wrecks me. And I have to take naps during the day, every day. I just did that like an hour and a half ago. I had to take a nap. because I physically can't stay awake. It's not narcolepsy, but it is the kind of thing where, like, you say, like, my eyes feel so heavy sort of thing. I literally can't keep my eyes open. So it's like, okay, well, I guess I need to go take a nap for half an hour. I have to do that in preparation for that hour and a half, and then I have to recover from it. And I actually head into a bunch of meetings for the afternoon for my day job right after we're done with that. Like, we sign off and I go straight into meetings for the next 3.5 hours. And then I go to bed. And my husband will call me like 7 o'clock and be like, okay, I made dinner, and I eat dinner, and then I go to bed. And like Mondays are just, that's my Monday. And because I know that, I have to prepare for it ahead of time so I've got enough energy to get through.
But it's really smart that you're preparing ahead of time for it. And I will say, so what comes to mind for me, again, is so like I had a doctor's appointment in March. And so this was before, so my thyroid has not been quite right. I have Graves' disease. It was underactive. Then it was overactive. And then I learned when it's overactive, not only do you get snappy and unpleasant, you can still get tired. And I'd never gotten tired with my thyroid overactive before, which is very interesting. And so my doctor said to me, because when I said, well, I have to go take a nap. I just don't feel like I have any energy. I have to do these things. And then I have to rest. And she's like, you've been really unwell, haven't you? You've just felt unwell. And I never thought of it that way. It's more of like, oh, I'm so tired. I feel like I must be being lazy, or I must be doing this. So I think it's really important for everyone to see how you're taking this great responsibility. This is going to do this, so I'm going to do these things to prepare for it, and I'm going to plan this time to recover from it. Because I know for me, even though I was taking that time, it was more of my body was taking that time. I wasn't making that conscious choice. It was like, I can sit here on the couch and try to write this post for the next 2 hours and get no words, or I could just go to sleep and get no words. So, and actually maybe be able to do something. So I think that's a really good point, though, too, is if you know something's going to tire you out. And from 2020, I'm an introvert anyhow. People don't think I am because I can be extroverted for a period. Like, I like people. I like you people. I don't like all people right now, but I like all of you. And I can go to Target and it's too much people, too much social contact, and I just have to go take a nap. And that's me just being me, right? So I think that, and that's one of the reasons why I thought it would be so interesting having you talk about things, because I think even though, someone who has chronic disease might be like, well, at least you get to go to Target, right? And so I'm not trying to compare it as a one-on-one, but I think these kinds of planning ahead and really learning to know yourself and know your body can help everyone.
Yeah, and it's called post-exertion malaise. So sometimes it's called PEM. So that is the fatigue you get after doing something that tires you out. And it can be, it all comes from the same energy envelope. So it could be mental, it could be physical, it could be emotional. So I could watch a really sad movie for 2 hours, and maybe I'm just crying my eyes out because it's so sad. That could take me out for 2 days. And that would have the same effect as if I was a dum-dum and was like, maybe I can run again, which I very much cannot do. If I tried to go for a run, that could take me out for 3 days. And it's like, or if like you just said, focusing on a blog post for 2 hours, that can take me out for 2 days. Like, that's all coming from the same thing. So that envelope is very small, and it's literally anything I might do while I'm awake. And trying to, like, there's no way to plan for the amount of energy that's in the envelope other than trial and error. And then if you guess wrong and you've like overestimated, you end up with the post-exertion malaise. And then that's, 2 days in bed sort of thing. So if I know, some friend of mine's getting married this weekend, I know that that is going to be way above and beyond anything I can handle. So like, I'm going to need to make sure there's places to sit. I have to make sure I'm allowed to bring my water bottle that has all my electrolyte powder. I got to make sure I have all my meds. I've got my cane. I've got to make sure my husband's got backups of everything. I have to make sure that we're not parking far away and all this. And then I also have to make sure, let's say the wedding's on Saturday. I'm going to take Monday and Tuesday off of work because chances are I'm going to need at least one, probably both of those days. And there's nothing I can do about it. I could be in bed for the entire week leading up to that wedding. I'm still going to need multiple days to recover from that, even if all I do is sit at the table just because it's the socialization and I'm up and doing all these things that I wouldn't normally be doing.
Well,
It's crazy.
and I think people really underestimate people who are introverts or at least not extroverts underestimate because it can depend on who you end up spending time with, right? I have one friend. Sure. I see her every Tuesday. It doesn't matter what we do. We took a 4-mile hike yesterday, which I am feeling, but I never feel like I have to take a nap after I talk to her. She's very even keel. She's very, but then I have another friend who is very extroverted. And so while she is not at all trying to be an energy vampire, it feels that, it's I can only spend so much time. And I think that we don't always consider that kind of emotional, mental energy when we're talking about like having a chronic illness or having energy. Like we think, oh, I don't have energy, I can't go for a walk today. It's not usually, oh, I don't have any energy, I can't possibly go to Target today, unless it's like 7 o'clock on Monday morning or something when 2 other people will be there.
Yeah. And I actually do plan everything. I don't want to exaggerate, but it might actually be everything. I plan to do it as early as possible in the day, even if all it is driving 5 minutes down the road to my pharmacy to get my meds. I'm going to do that the second they open because I need to be able to go in and get my insurance card out and make sure that I'm like reading all the bottles correctly and that everything's right because I've not done that. It was terrible. And it like just to have the energy to do that. And that's maybe 15 minutes of stuff. And I'm going to do that first thing in the morning. So by the time I get to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm just like done. So if people schedule me meetings and stuff for work, I'm very open with them that like, I'm going to step away for a little bit because I go take a nap to account for this meeting, from 4 to 6 p.m. And there's just nothing I can do about it. I can't make that not happen. So I just have to plan accordingly. And I'm thankful that my boss is very understanding of that. He's known me for many years and he gets it. He knows that like I'm going to be worthless. So either I do this and like scatter that productivity throughout the day, knowing it's still going to be waning, or I just don't work here anymore because it's not possible. I just cannot do it. And if I had to physically go into an office, which is not a thing that I've done in 10 years, I couldn't. I just couldn't. I definitely couldn't. So I'm thankful. I am a remote employee and I'm going to stay that way as long as I can.
Being at home, I think, works really well for people with chronic illness and introverts or ambiverts as well. It seems to me the people who have complained the most tend to be extroverts, and that is just anecdotal information. So if someone has a real study, tell me and I will put that up, I promise. But my friends who really want to do something or be, because I'm like, this is awesome. Like I don't teach classes in person. I teach online classes, but also I have when I teach an evening class, I start at 4 because by 7, I'm done. I'm like, and I really will lose words and stuff like that. Like I'm just, it's not super helpful to people, but I think it's really interesting how it's kind of amazing actually how well that you kind of know yourself and you've set these really clear boundaries. That's impressive in and of itself.
It's taken, what is this? This is June. About a year every single day going through it to figure this out. It did not happen quickly at all. And I'm still trying to figure stuff out. Like it's an ongoing thing. And I know that's also because my condition's also kind of deteriorating at the same time. So I'm trying to like catch up to that. But it's been like a solid year to figure out any of this.
And that's when you got your new diagnosis for POTS?
Yeah, and then everything else came after that. Because up to that point, they were just, I won't get into the details of all this because I know it can be controversial, but they were just saying long COVID and left it at that and said like that we can't help you. But I kept pushing and advocating for myself and begging every doctor in Boston to talk to me. And so they finally did, and it took about 2.5 years of booking appointments and having to wait for those appointments. And then, some had to be virtual. And then I was finally able to see them in person, but they didn't have time for physical tests. That was going to be another 8 months before they did that. These appointments were booked years in advance.
Oh,
And so it took
wow.
about 2.5 years before they gave me any of these answers.
That's really, really, really hard. And it's again, I think it's pretty impressive that you advocated for yourself so well. I know it wasn't easy. And then when we think of this other layer, so advocating for yourself usually isn't super easy and second nature for most people,
Yeah.
but also you didn't feel well. And not
Yeah.
only did you just not feel well, you felt really bad.
Yeah, it was like in bed, could not get up, could not move, sort of thing, where like my husband had to do everything, just had to do everything. And I'm thankful that I have him and that he could do that. But I, it's not. I think the misconception people have is like it's not. You don't just not feel well. You physically cannot do things. Like there will be 4 days that go by that I can't take a shower because I can't be upright for that long. So I have a shower stool that I try to use. And sometimes just the act of like even sitting in a chair like this, that's way too much. So it's like I have to be laying down and I can't lay down and take a shower because I'll drown. So it's like I guess I'm just not showering for 4 days, like it's it's serious. And I think people really trivialize it. Oh yeah, I've been pretty tired too. And you're like, no.
No, and I agree. And even with my comparisons, I'm not trying to make those kind of comparisons at all.
Yep.
And when I'm thinking of your chronic illness, I go back in my head to my serious depression in 2021, where Cheryl had to do everything. I was in bed for like a couple of weeks almost. I'm like, you thought about showering. Good for you. And that's why I think too, depression and anxiety can play some of the same symptoms, even though like a chronic illness is a chronic illness. And it's not like you're going to feel better next week. Like if I have a normal depression, I know that there's a beginning and an end to it. Right?
Yeah, right. Depressive periods are temporary.
Typically, yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you're in a
general.
I had a couple of months going on and I'm like, But,
Yeah.
I was able to go and get some help for that and then kind of, but I find it, I have other friends that have some chronic illness as well. And it is really hard. It seems like most people end up with these kind of, like you said, almost generic diagnosis. And
Yeah.
I know I wouldn't feel super good about that.
No, it's not. Those aren't great, but once you have the generic one, I don't want to say it's easier to get the comorbidities diagnosed, but it is sort of a validation. It's like, cool, so you've acknowledged something's wrong. Can we also dig into that and figure out what is wrong? And like it's almost like, and I kind of hate making this comparison, but it's almost like being somebody that makes X amount of money. And then once you get higher than that amount of money, people are like, oh, you're very important. Let me help you now because now I deem you as, worth my time and respect. And that's kind of what it is. It's like, oh, you passed the tests to get POTS? Okay, cool. So now we'll look into everything else that you've been begging us to look into for years.
That totally makes sense though, because like it's frustrating, and I've heard other frustrations of just general women going to doctors stuff
Yeah.
too. So there's that, and then there's like, I'm sure with your endometriosis you went through some of that as well. But what I can also kind of understand for a second, not for very long, that they're like, well, what do we do with this? What tests would we do? Like if you're just like, I'm exhausted all the time, I'm this, because it's the symptom of so many different things. So I could
Yep.
see why for the medical community, they would be able to do more, because they're like, okay, we have a thing. Now I know these things come off of that.
Right. Right.
And
And they do. They have their like the branching off of all the things, and in my personal experience with the Boston area doctors at Mass Gen and Brigham and Tufts and all of these supposedly top hospitals in the country, and I'm not saying that to demean them, but the fact that I have to go through some of the things I have to go through to actually see these doctors is a little absurd. But the good ones that I've seen, they do. It's kind of like a flow chart, and they'll say like, okay, so you've got the fatigue, you've got the super high heart rate, you're passing out if you look down, and your toes have been purple. Okay, so it's not Ehlers-Danlos. Okay, so it's not that one. So we'll go down here. So then you also said that you have dry mouth and this and that. Okay, well, it can't be this because of this. Okay, so then we'll go to the next thing. Whereas the ones that are not so good would just look at me and then read through I have a binder over here that is separated by specialty and then runs in reverse chronological order of all the symptoms and when I saw them in the last test that I had run. And so I would hand them, I give them a one sheet of here's the TLDR that you need to know since the last time I saw a specialist. And
how
here's the history if you want to
smart.
read the rest of it. But you have to,
But
because that is like the most concise way to get their attention. And even then, half the time, it's, I don't know, you're probably just, oh, why don't you get some vitamin 12, B12 shots and I'm sure it's fine. It's like, no, you have to listen longer than that.
well, and
It's infuriating.
yeah, a couple of things like that I'm seeing. So Linda is saying, I had never heard of PM before today. I hadn't either, and it sounds like my life. Thank you for sharing this, because it means so much to be able to understand why I am the way I am. And then Joanne is saying, it's so difficult when you don't know or understand the person who lives inside your body.
Oh
Someone
my
came
God,
in and
yes.
replaced you, and you don't know where you are anymore,
Yep.
right?
Yep. It's like somebody has just possessed your body and it is not you. It's terrifying. It really is. And God, she put that perfectly because that's totally what it is. I am not, I always say to my husband, I'm like, I am not the person that you married anymore. It's wild to me that this is just not how I ever thought I would be. I used to be wildly, wildly active and like always on the go and like really didn't get tired. And now it's the exact opposite.
What amazes me, and again about you, is so you have this full time job that's pretty hard and demanding. You
Mhm.
have two blogs, and you've just started a third blog. And
Mhm.
if anyone can understand kind of doing those extra things, it would be me. But,
No, you don't say.
right. Oh, this week looks good. I'll just work 14 hours a day for a while. And sometimes I have the energy to do it and sometimes I don't. But like what amazes me is like how do you manage your energy in a way that you're able to do all that you're doing currently, because you're doing a lot, a real lot.
It's it is honestly the thing, it's the most frustrating thing to me just because of the way I'm wired, but it is also the most important thing for me dealing with this is that I have to prioritize the basic things. Because, like I mentioned, taking a shower before, like that could be an absolute non-starter. So if I don't take the shower, then I've got a little bit more energy that I could take the photos of that recipe I wanted to do. It's like, okay, cool. So I'm going to be dirty, but I'm going to get the photos done. That's good. And then maybe I don't make my lunch that day and I ask my husband to make me something. Then if he, or maybe we planned ahead and we did meal planning because we were actually smart. Maybe that's already done, so I don't have to make lunch. So it's like, okay, cool. Then maybe I can also do a little brainstorming on some of the posts I want to get done for each of the sites, and I can just make my 3 tiers. And here's some brainstorming ideas. Okay, cool. And then maybe I take an extra nap that day, so I have a little bit more energy to stay up past like 8 o'clock. And maybe I do some writing that night. And so it's like swapping out very basic things that like a normal person should just be able to do, but I'm swapping them out for, the optional stuff that I want to do myself. So if I want to make a new recipe, that might mean telling my dad, I know we said we were going to try to grab lunch today, but I can't because I really want to get these 2 posts done or whatever. And we actually on Sunday we had lunch with my dad, and I could tell he wanted to hang out a little bit longer, and I was like, we got to go because I have to get this stuff done. And I can feel like it's like watching fog roll in off the ocean. You can see it coming. I'm like, it's not there yet. Brain fog has not hit, but I can see it. And if I don't get home right now and get through as much of this as I possibly can, I'm screwed. So like, we got to go. We got to get home. And it really was like trying to beat the storm because we got home. I got like 3/4 through the way of what I wanted to do. And I hit the wall and I was like, nope, I guess I'm done. And I was out sick of work yesterday and I had a really bad day the day before and I was kind of working. And it was like 4 days later, I finally finished that thing. So it's the reprioritization of basic needs against the optional stuff. And it's hard.
It is hard. And Justine is saying, Leslie, you seem so strong. It's so hard to advocate for yourself with doctors, especially when you're worried and nervous about your health. And she's got like 3 exclamation points. So, and that's a whole other energy thing too. I mean, I think that's that's the thing that, I wasn't seeing before, just knowing you the way I know you, because if you had no chronic illness, it's pretty amazing what you get done for the stuff that you have. Like even alone, I was a little jealous, I have to say. I'm just like, wow, how'd she do all that? It's so amazing. But then you never think about that other layer of, yes, you have to go in, and when you have a chronic illness of just about any kind of people that I know, you're seeing multiple doctors and having multiple tests and now you're talking about it with all the people, and even just saying all that made me feel a little bit exhausted. Honestly.
Just like tired and itchy. It is. I have at least one doctor's appointment every week. And that's what it is now. Like, this is the rheumatologist. Next week is the neurologist. The week after that is ortho.
Right. And they're all very important. And Linda's saying, while on my journey to a diagnosis of an ultra rare disease, I was diagnosed with multiple conditions. Many doctors told me that I should just accept and not ask questions and organize my affairs.
That infuriates me. It absolutely infuriates me because I have been dismissed like that by doctors, one of which I'm like kind of amazed I didn't get arrested at the hospital for the way I responded to that.
I'm sorry.
I wasn't like physically violent. But I was at the end. I think that was after 1 year of trying to get to stuff and being told like, this is the guy you have to see. He is going to have the answers. This is the guy. He's great. And I don't think I've ever met a bigger jerk in my entire life. And he was so dismissive of me that, like, the best example of the many things he did that were so wrong during that appointment, aside from the fact that he also never even examined me, um, he threw a tissue box at me from across the room. And he was
What?
like, "Get yourself together."
Oh, I
Like,
would have had some words.
oh, I had lots of them very loudly. But I guess the silver lining of all this is that he thought the way to respond to that was be like, you know what? Why don't I just talk to my manager then? And I was like, okay. And his admin or whatever gave me his boss's information, and she ended up diagnosing me and giving me a surgery like 2 weeks later that I needed because she actually listened to me, and that man is not a surgeon anymore. So, not saying it was because of me, but it was pretty loud.
Well, it
And
sounds
that's
like it
just
was
not
because
helpful.
of him, because he shouldn't have been there to deal with people at all. Like, it's one thing to be kind of making some mistakes or not being able to be empathetic or be in the moment with someone. It's a whole other thing to antagonize someone who doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
I feel like
And that was very
my
much what he
motto
did.
is I'm as nice as you let me be, and most people let me be real nice.
Aw.
But those that
I feel like
don't, I don't feel bad. I don't feel bad about it.
no, and I don't either. I'm not like hot tempered or anything, but if you're my gut is always right, and if my gut is telling you that you are not a good person and you are not trying to be helpful and all these things, like, I'm gonna call you on it real quick, and it's not gonna go well. And that's what happened. And it's just I don't it takes so much energy and time and just devote like it's another full-time job to try to manage your illness and get to the people you need to get to and get the medications you need and the tests you need and the surgeries you need and all this that, like, I don't have time to mess around with people that aren't going to help me. So if I'm on the phone with somebody and they're like, "Oh, I don't know, let me just talk to some people and get back to you," I'm like, "Nope, you clearly are not going to help. Like, goodbye, I release you." It's just not. I don't have time for it, and let's not waste your time if you're not going to be useful. So it's just a battle. It's an uphill battle all the time. And that's why I think it's so important for everybody to be their own advocate. And for the people that struggle with that, like, people have commented that they struggle with that, it's not easy. And so if that means you have to get, like, your wingman to come with you to appointments to yell at people for you, do it. I will be that person. Like, I don't have time for that. Nobody does. And so you shouldn't have to fight so hard anyway. But I really advocate for people to get a buddy if you have to. Like, I don't care who it is, but have somebody there with you that will not let you leave that room until you get the answer that you need. And I'm okay being my own person for that, but I know a lot of people that are much more mild-mannered than me and more shy, and I'm also an introvert too, but, like, way more introverted than me, and they have, like, a friend or a husband or a wife or whatever that comes with them to these appointments, and they block the door and they're like, "Nope, you have not answered my loved one's questions yet. We are not leaving this room." And you have to. It sucks. It just sucks.
But everybody, like, I have a friend who's a medical mom, which means she's has
Mm,
special medical needs children. And
mm,
talking to her, because she's so on top of it, like, she's such a great advocate for them. But
mm,
one of their daughters has a pretty rare disease, and she's the only one with that disease that's walking and talking and doing things. Like, it's a very debilitating disease. So she was contacted by a doctor on the West Coast. She's Central East Coast, kind of. And then she was
mm.
like, she told me, well, I had to think, do they want to see her to help Phoebe, or do they want to see her to help their study? And it
Mm.
gave me a different perspective, and that's kind of like what you're saying too. So, like, learn, like, for me being me, because y'all want me to be on your show? I'll probably be on your show. Like, I'm just like, whatever, I'll do whatever. But then I'm trying to learn to be a little more like, yeah, that doesn't serve me. It doesn't serve my purpose. And Joanne was saying she needs a wingman, and Cheryl and I go to appointments together. So like, we've been doing this for years. So with our GP, we make them at the same time. So we're just in the
Nice.
room. I'm like, just get us all done, and then that way, whoever says, yeah, like she had been telling me she was taking her medicine. We get in the doctor's office, she's like, yeah, no, I haven't been taking it. I'm like, I just asked you, right? So we will totally rat each
Oh,
other out. But also, on the other hand, if I forget that like my back hurt in a certain place, then maybe I should talk about it. You
oh,
have kind of that extra thing. And
mhm.
I had had a very bad experience with a doctor that I'd had for a long time that was great, and she changed her practice and was no longer appropriate. And so I still miss my old doctor that doesn't exist, right? So I had an appointment
Right.
with Dr. Lim from Dr. McDougall's 12-day program. And she's like, well, let me listen in. And I was like, oh, okay, because I was super nervous about meeting a new doctor. We found a new doctor that we loved, but I have such
Yeah.
PTSD about it. And he was
Yeah.
perhaps the most lovely man I have ever spoken to. Like, holistic, how do you feel? What voice in your head are you listening to? Like, all these really wonderful things. But even just having Cheryl listening next to me as I was going back trying to figure it out, having her input and saying, you know, he really talked about this thing and that was really important to you too. And I was like, oh yeah. So having somebody else
Mhm.
there can just be really helpful in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah, it totally does. I've had my husband at some appointments, but honestly not many of them. Um, because frankly, even with the brain fog, my memory's still better than his. But I have to write everything down, like everything at this point, because I will forget. On my worst days, I will forget what I was saying mid-sentence, and it's terrifying. It's like dementia, except I'm completely aware that it's happening. So I have to write everything down, and I've got a daily log of everything I eat and all of my symptoms when I wake up, and then by the midday, and then when I go to bed, and all these things, so that I have all that stuff written down when I go to appointments so that I don't forget anything. Because it might be, 3 days, 6 months ago that were really bad, but that would be really critical information for them. And there's no way I'm going to recall that if it's not written down. So it's like some doctors look at me like I'm insane and that it's overkill, but I'm like, how else am I going to accurately represent my condition and then advocate for myself if I can't remember what I did 10 minutes ago? And just writing everything down has been huge for me. And I recommend that to just everybody. Like actually, I'm going to grab it because it's pretty ridiculous. The binder, oh God, is so this, and it's like about to explode. I think I need another one. But everything in here is
That's
by
awesome.
it's ridiculous, but it's necessary. And so sometimes at doctor's appointments, they'll be like, do you want a printed copy or whatever? And I'm like, yes, whatever it is, I don't care. Yes, give me a printed copy because it's going to go right in here.
But
And
when you're seeing so many different
lightsaber.
doctors, though, it's so nice because I've
Mhm.
even found out, like, so we have Duke and UNC here in Durham. And they have their own systems, and the systems supposedly talk to each other, but they don't always, right?
No,
And Linda's saying, like, oh, and Joanne says your binder's amazing. And I do agree it is
I would be happy
too.
to share the details.
And that's awesome. And people should contact you about that. Linda's saying, I have some amazing specialists now that are in teaching hospitals. It's a 2.5 hour drive each way and 10-hour days. I usually go on my own and I'm never sure if I'm going to have the energy to drive home. And that's very hard.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've I lived up in Burlington, Vermont for a while, and I had to do that coming down to Boston, which is about 3.5 hours. And it would be the same. I was like, there's absolutely no way I'm driving home tonight. So thankfully I already had friends in the area. So I would just plan to stay with somebody that night. But yeah, you're going to a 30-minute doctor appointment and it's a 2-day ordeal. God, I feel for her. That's awful.
And my friend that's a medical mom, she lives in Tennessee and she goes to the hospitals in Cincinnati a couple of times a month. So it's just, it amazes me. And I probably should have her on too because Melissa's just amazing. And you would love her too. She actually is a blogger as well and was blogging around foster care and adoption. And now is kind of doing more medical mom stuff. But just the things that she has organized, just like you have organized, it's just amazing. And like I was talking to her, she was going to Cincinnati to have her daughter's eyes looked at. And then she's like, oh, that doctor was actually doing a presentation somewhere on her daughter's eyes. And she's like, I won't let anybody else touch her eyes. So no, we went up there, we had fun, we made some other doctor's appointments we can make and we'll go back up there again. So even that again, so like we've talked about normal life, going to doctors, and then there's the specialists and how you have to maybe go out of your way to even be able to see them. Do you find most of your people, because Boston's pretty big, I feel like there's a lot of specialties where I live as well.
Yeah, it's, I do count myself lucky that I am supposedly living in like, the one of top 3 areas for medical specialties and whatnot. But so it's less the distance I need to travel. Like the travel for me isn't too bad. I live on the South Coast on a peninsula. I'm basically in the middle of the ocean outside of Boston. So I take a ferry to get in. But the ferry schedule is very limited and stuff. So like it turns into an all-day thing no matter what, just because of that schedule. But, like the ferry is a lovely way to commute. But it's take the ferry and then get on probably the blue line and then take the blue line over to the red line and then the red line down to here to this stop. And then I got to walk to this. And, it's like, it's exhausting. And I used to be able to do that. And now it's kind of turned into a thing where I try to get the earliest appointment or the latest appointment in the day so that my husband can drive because it's too much. And then by the time I get there, I'm like already in tears. So it's not so much that part of it that's difficult for me, but it's the availability of people. Like I made an appointment beginning of last November for this coming Christmas. Because he's the only guy. And that was his earliest appointment, was 13 and a half months out.
Wow. Do you at least get to because you're sort of close, can you do the whole if somebody cancels, or do they do that automatically? Or is it too hard to get there if somebody canceled immediately?
No. So I am definitely on a list for those sorts of things. The part that's like kind of hilarious to me is that that specialist with the patients he's seeing, he won't see these patients until they've been through X amount of different medications and these and that and seeing all these people. So there's like all these qualifying criteria to get there. But all of the patients he sees, you are on medications. But to see him, you have to have been off of them for 4 days. So they'll call you the night before and be like, there's a cancellation. Would you like to come in? And be like, I would love to come in, but I can't go back in time. So they've called me twice since then to be like, do you want to come in? I'm like, do you guys think about this before? Like, if somebody canceled a week out, absolutely. But if somebody cancels the day before, none of us can take that appointment, man. Like, go play golf.
And yeah, that totally makes sense. Because and it's interesting to me because in my experiences, I've never had something where I needed to be off of medications to go to that doctor. So that's very interesting to think that there can be, because that does make it almost impossible. Because they would have to be like, I got diagnosed with COVID on Monday and my appointment is on Friday, so of course I can't come. It would have to be, and I would also suspect most of the people aren't wanting to make those cancellations because they've waited a year to get there. So it would have to be something like, I have COVID, I have pneumonia, I have,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, like it's funny, but not really. It's mostly just frustrating, but it's like I appreciate you reaching out, but that's not helpful. That doesn't actually do anything for me.
and what do they say? Do they realize that after they talk to you?
That's the kicker, is that it's always the same woman. I think she's the only person that works the desk there, and she calls and she'll, we have an availability tomorrow morning at 8. I'll be like, right, but I have to be off my meds for 4 days, and she'll go, yeah. I'm like, so no, because I'm on my meds. Okay. I'm like,
Oh, see, at that point, have you emailed the
okay.
doctor? I would email the doctor.
Oh no. This is like trying to talk to the president directly or something. Like, you do not get his contact information. The closest you get is this woman at the desk. And like, I've tried to be nice enough about it to be like, can you just stop calling me with the world's stupidest question? But that's asking too much. Like, and I'm sure that she is like probably totally tapped too with everything that we've gone through in the last few years. So it's like, I try to give that bit of grace to people to be like, I'm sure we're all exhausted. We've all been through a lot. But like, can you just like think for a second? Please. Please stop making me do the work for you.
Oh, that's hard. And Lydia's saying, I don't even want to see my doctor anymore. The last time I saw her in February, she told me she was discouraged with me and I should see a therapist. And Justine said that. Yeah, I think.
I mean, it's one thing to say, like, I feel like it would benefit you to start seeing a therapist. Let me help you with some referrals. But to say, I'm discouraged with you? No. Mm-mm. Give me your information. I just want to talk.
And you can reach her through her website that we've been showing too. So, or just email me at kathyhester@gmail and I'll pass your info over.
Yeah, either way.
But finding the right doctor is very difficult. And I give Cheryl more props than I ever gave her, because in 2020, I always found the doctors. I always did all that research and took care of that. But with me not being able to and being so like done, she took that over and did really great research. But it's not easy, to either get in with a good doctor, because oftentimes they're full. Like, my friend moved here and I said, go ahead and get in with Dr. Bean. It's Dr. Stacy Bean in Chapel Hill, and I love her. And there was a chance she could have, but they opened it and closed it because she can't take any more patients. So she sees a nurse practitioner. And nothing against nurse practitioners. I've seen plenty of them, but it's also really nice to just have a GP, if for no other reason, if you're super healthy, to get really good referrals and recommendations because I don't know all the doctors, and Cheryl is not I like to go to the gynecologist person, and she found this touchy-feely woman who has purple walls and and Cheryl came back from that and she's like, that she was wonderful. And so I think because your GP gets to know your personality, what you will put up with or not, right? Somebody else should not go to that lady, should go to the person who's just like, okay, lickety split, we're done, right? And finding the right person, and it takes a lot of effort. And when I was looking for GPs anyhow, which is you would think would be way easier than specialists, it almost felt like I was looking for a specialist. They have a lot of places now that don't take insurance, that you pay monthly payments to the doctors, and they do their labs in-house. I noticed that, which is fine, but I have good insurance now. If I didn't have good insurance, I know who I would go to.
Right.
And then it's like finding all these different places. It's just very interesting. And so would be, if I were you in your position, it would make me very, I would be very nervous because of my little doctor PTSD right now. Like I have my liver guy. He's pretty nice. We're on a thing. At first I wasn't sure about him, but then we had a little talk and I felt good. But like,
Yeah.
and for me, I have to kind of, unless somebody can say, yes, I look on your chart, I see these three things, and these are the things you're going to do, which is not normal either. I either need that or I need someone who's like, really, I'm feeling them out and they have some sense of me and who I am, and that they're not going to go, okay, you're going to go on the carnivore diet to fix you, because I'm not.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of any situation that I would do that. Now, I'm not saying other changes in diet, like what you're going through too. And I don't know if you want to
Mhm.
talk about the diet, or maybe how changing your diet is maybe affecting your routine or how you're doing things, like, because you have to then become educated on it. So if we're talking about a whole food plant-based SOS diet, or if we're talking about any other diet, so just fill in your personal diet in the blank while we're doing this, because there's a learning curve for most people.
Yeah, there definitely is, because this isn't so the suggestion that was made to me was to start doing I'm calling it a high protein diet, but it's not. I very much hesitate to use the word diet, but I can't think of a better way to describe it. Um, I was not getting anywhere near enough protein. So this isn't necessarily a low carb, no sugar, like all of these sorts. It's not keto or anything. It's just much higher protein than what I've been doing naturally. Because I'm eating healthy, just not enough of the thing that I need. And the reason that that was proposed to me was because, and hopefully I'm going to explain this the right way. Um, because the conditions I have cause the severe fatigue and whatnot. The unfortunate side of that coin is that it also causes you to never get restful sleep. So I am never going to wake up again and be like, oh, what a good night's sleep that was. Ever. I wake up exhausted every single day, and it doesn't matter how much I've slept. So because I'm not sleeping restfully, my body is not recovering. So if my body's not recovering, it's not going through all these like cell transformations and everything it needs to do to repair itself. So my body, like the situation's just degrading day by day. And because I wasn't getting enough protein, my body went into like hibernation, and I started just rapidly gaining all this weight because my body was like, I guess we don't do stuff anymore and I don't want you to die. So it just stopped everything. It was like, well, we're going to store all the fat that we can because we don't know what to do with it. And I didn't have enough protein in there for it to eat away at that. And so it was just thinking, not even like starving myself, I'm just not doing anything. And it just went into hibernation. So the theory that he had run past me was the registered dietitian anyway, was that if I up the amount of protein, one, it should help a little bit with my energy, which I'm not seeing yet, but it's only been a few weeks. Um, and then it's going to give my body those reserves that it needs to actually get through that. And then there's vitamin deficiencies and stuff that I've always struggled with, that like maybe I can stop getting injections for those instead if I get the right amount of proteins from like this lean protein over here, and then maybe a little bit more of this thing over here. So we're kind of tinkering with it still, but the main concept is that I needed way more protein, like 4 times more protein than what I was getting. And I'm still not at any degree that like I don't know, like fitness gurus and stuff, the amounts that I see them talk about, we're not going anywhere near that. So it's really a higher protein diet, but it's it's not hard to plan for necessarily for me because I'm not vegan or necessarily plant-based. I kind of do it naturally just because of the foods that I like and things. I always tell my husband, like, if he stopped bringing home meat, I probably wouldn't notice because I'd be like, all right, that's cool. I'm gonna eat all this other stuff over here. But because it's not a restriction for me, it's not that hard to prep. It's just hard for me to actually eat it because it's just so much more food than I would naturally eat.
Okay. And I've heard other people have some issues like that before too. And it's kind of like on the whole food plant-based diet, and again, diet in the same way that you are, like I
Yeah.
sometimes say eating plan just because it's,
Oh, I like that.
because that way it doesn't make anyone feel like I'm trying to put some sort of label about it.
Yeah.
Um, but you actually eat a lot more food because you're doing
Hmm.
nutrient density.
Yep.
And so it is very interesting. Let's
Yeah.
see. Now, Lydia said, let's see where I was finally able to get help from a gastroenterologist for, yeah. Well,
Knowledgeist.
thank you. I'm like, that word is too long for me to pronounce and be on camera.
Mm-hmm.
With esophageal, how do you, here, I'm just going to put it up
Esophageal.
here. You guys can read it. I'm going to, with something with around here and could hardly eat for a year, but I'm finally seeing some progress. So good. I'm glad you found a good
Oh, that's
doctor,
great.
which is the most important thing of all of this. And Anne says was recently diagnosed with lupus, and on top of that, I have fibromyalgia and rheumatoid arthritis. So that seems like she's probably having some of the same and similar issues you are. And Liz says
Literally feel your pain.
to you, I don't expect you to answer this on air, so you don't have to, but have you been tested for sleep apnea because your symptoms are okay?
Yeah.
I kind of figured you might have.
Yeah, before we went down any kind of like chronic illness route with any of this stuff, my husband and I actually did one at the same time. Um, and I'm totally good. He is not, but like he's fine. But in terms of the sleeping part, he's got some problems. But yeah, that came back and they were like, no, it's actually like really wonderful. And like I have an Aura ring that tracks all my activity and stuff. I used to wear like fitness watches, but now with fibromyalgia, everything hurts. So having a watch on hurt. Um, but this tracks everything. And we'd go through the logs and like, according to this, I'm getting all sorts of great sleep. And it's like, oh, and the REM is this, that, and the other, but I'm really not. My everything is not shutting down the way that it should shut down. But as far as like a sensor that's attached to your finger it thinks I'm doing a good job, which is frustrating.
That would be particularly frustrating for me, like to have
Hmm.
these signs come back. But I think, when you have a lot of like autoimmune diseases or chronic illnesses, there's so many different factors at play. And I mean, obviously, I am not a doctor by any means, but
Ditto.
but you can just see all these different layers because I mean, even if you just take it to basic, like when you have the flu, and even if you sort of had a good night's sleep, you don't feel right. And so, again, kind of going back
Mhm.
to when my doctor said this very basic thing that somehow blew my mind, you must have not been well for so long. And you just don't, and that means so many
Mm.
different layers of things. And
It really
so
does.
it's so, because I'm sure you went through so many different layers just to get where you are now. And I mean,
Yeah.
with this new doctor, do you feel like that you're going to see at the end of this year, right?
Yeah.
Is he or she going to be focusing on something a little more specific, or
He is, I'm a part of, and have been since I started late 2020. I'm a part of long COVID medical studies. And there's an organization that running it sounds weird, but an organization called All of Us, and they're kind of coordinating genetic testing and like all of these things. And he is seeing me as a participant in those studies specific to POTS and all the symptoms I've had related to that, and whether or not those actually tied into what happened with when I had got COVID. Because, very long story short, I got it before we knew we had it here, so there was no treatment. So I didn't get any treat. I wasn't treated for it, and so my health has just deteriorated since then. Um, but it's just a very niche kind of appointment. Um, from what I'm told, this guy is great. But I haven't talked to him. I haven't seen him. It's like I talk to the woman that asks me the world's stupidest question every time she calls me. So I don't know anything about it. But the fact that it is a part of this study, every appointment that I have on the phone or email or in person or whatever related to these studies, they are very thorough. So like that does give me hope, because they do have like actual government checkboxes that they're going through, rather than just like a dude randomly seeing me.
That's kind of awesome too, though, and just that you're being in that study, because like pretty much
Mhm.
for most diseases and illnesses that are out there, there are studies going on. Like even for
Right.
mine, like with non-alcoholic fatty liver and fibrosis. So one of the things my doctor had said is, do you want to be considered for studies? So,
Mhm.
and I'm where Duke and UNC are. There's lots of things that happen right in my area. I'm sure in Boston it's the same
Yeah.
way. But I love the idea because, talking about going from long COVID, so that way you get to also be in kind of a community where you can at least hook up with someone and, be introduced to someone who's having some similar things, because my
Yeah.
my friend's son had leukemia in the 90s, right, kind of when the internet started coming up, and
Mhm.
it's not at like you couldn't Google things and like worry yourself to
Yeah.
death. But there were a lot of message groups. So through those message groups,
Yes.
she because he was a baby, he was under 6 months when he was diagnosed. He's doing great. He's doing great, but
Oh, good.
she was able to find like the 10 other moms of babies that got diagnosed and talk about those
Yeah.
things, and it was a very powerful like tool for her that I think in decades past it was just a lot harder. And I think even if you're in a study and doing some stuff like that, that's got to it. I know it doesn't make it better, but maybe you can see that you can talk to someone who saw a doctor and go, don't see that doctor, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's legitimately, I'm I'm not good at social media. Not a fan of it. Like I am part of the generation that uh we didn't have it growing up, and now that's it's just everybody has it. But I just never really acclimated well to it, so I do my best, I really do. But Instagram for the chronic illness stuff has turned into just like a massive resource for me, because there are all these people who are so willing to share those kinds of experiences, and they're saying like, oh my god, you're in Boston, do not go to this person at Brigham because they did this and this and this and this, and I have all the receipts to back it up, and like I'll talk to you offline kind of thing. And people are so willing to help each other in this community, because we all struggle so hard to get anything done. And so having yeah, like even one person that you can bounce things off of is massive for the resource management aspect of it, but also just to validate, because you start to feel crazy. And I said this to my husband this morning. I said, I feel like I am completely losing my mind. And he was like, yeah, i I bet you do, because you feel like a crazy person because you're having all these symptoms and you're like, is it in my head? This guy told me it couldn't be possible. Is it really possible? It's happening to me, so it must be possible. And you just start to feel insane after a while. And if you've had multiple invalidating appointments with specialists and things too leading up to that, it just makes it so much worse. And like the gaslighting is real and all of these things, and it all piles up on you, and it is so much weight on your shoulders just to get through a day, and to also have just the mental fatigue of it, of like, that actually happened, right? Like I'm actually feeling that. And having somebody you can say like, these things happened to me today, has this ever happened to you, and have them be like, oh god, it happens to me all the time. Just that is like, cool. Okay. Awesome. Thank you very much. Like, you don't even need to vent about it. You just need somebody to say, yeah, no, that's a real thing.
And
so much better.
oh, I totally understand that. Like even in a friend of mine was the same age and we met in our 30s, so we check in. So you getting those little hairs on your chin? Yep. Okay, we're going on to the next thing. So,
Yes.
and I know it's also nice just when you're, because I think aging is a little bit of an unsure thing too. So, and
Yeah.
I don't know about you or how this affects you, but I can often tell that I'm getting a cold or getting sick because I get super cranky, have no patience, and I'm snippy. Like, so sometimes, and for some reason, I want to get in the car and go somewhere, like the store or whatever. So it's
Huh.
like my body wants to run away from it. I don't know. So,
Oh.
and it makes me feel tired and cranky. So I wonder too, like you're doing these doctor's appointments, perhaps you feel a little less than optimal emotionally as well, and you're
Yeah.
tired, and it's got to be just really, really hard, sometimes. And I think it's okay to say it's hard and do it.
Yeah, it's trying. I mean, it's all hard, but we all do hard things. It's it is difficult to distinguish when something is a symptom of one of these five disorders versus getting sick, like just getting a cold, or literally just didn't get enough sleep. Like it's not restful sleep, but it's still sleep. And maybe I just didn't get enough. Or my head hurts because we're about to have a hurricane come in. Like it could be that, it could be any number of things. So it's so hard to distinguish the difference between those and not panic. So it's like if I get a migraine, it's like, oh God, that's one of the worst symptoms of this, that, and the other. And it could be that. Or it's that the pressure dropped. Like it could be either one of those things. And it's hard not to, go down the WebMD rabbit hole where you're convinced you're dying.
Well, and it's so interesting because like I can make a comparison to just how we all were in like 2021, 2022. Is it allergies or do I have COVID? Right? Like
Yeah.
I had a little virus. So like we're like, do we have any COVID tests left? But sometimes a cold's just a cold. Some so
Yeah.
so and I know it's not triggering to the same extent, but we are all kind of going through what does this mean on top of something else, and I would assume, and you tell me if I'm wrong because we all know that Odd Couple episode about assume, right? Um, that probably sometimes you might feel a little depressed or you might feel anxious, and that gets piled on top of that. Because sometimes anxiety can feel like a symptom if you're not
Oh,
really
yeah.
paying attention, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it is literally a symptom of fibromyalgia, a symptom and consequence of it, um, because your neural pathways are all messed up. And it'll convince you that your legs do not work anymore and there's nothing wrong with them. But like you will freak out and it causes you anxiety. Or and this was part of my problem yesterday, my neck, basically the nerves in my neck leading to one side of my body were super overreactive, whatever had happened. And my heart rate was just skyrocketing, even on my medications that are helping with that. And it was super anxiety inducing. And it was making me think it's like I got a brain tumor or something like that. And it was just a nerve. Like it was just a nerve in my neck. And then I went to see the doctor yesterday and he did some crazy voodoo and he was like, oh yeah, it's this, that, and the other. If I put my hand in, and it was the vagus nerve. That's what it was. And he's like, so if I press on this, does anything change? I'm like, oh my God, it feels so much better. And he's like, yep, no, you're fine. I'm like, okay, cool. Like that's the kind of stuff that it's all of it is anxiety producing. And if it's not a thing that's happened before to me, I freak out. If it's happened before, no matter how distressing it is, I'll be like, oh yeah, that, whatever. Like my left foot will go purple and blue. And like the first time it happened, we ran to the ER. Now I'm like, oh yeah, that. Well, what are you gonna do?
Well, and the thing is that then you're getting it kind of layered on top of each other too, again, so like, it's like, okay, these 50 symptoms, I know what they are when they happen. I know it's not a big deal, but especially if you're looking at multiple conditions like you are, there may be 500 things that you haven't quite experienced yet. And I just think even the way that you're just like, calm, I'm going to go to the ER and get it checked out. I think that you're just doing things so well, and you're such a good example. And I can't thank you enough for the community, even though I'm not a part of the chronic illness community, but for all of us and everybody watching, for giving us like all these really great ideas. And I think also, I feel like you're giving everyone permission to feel how they feel, recognize that anxiety, right?
Yep.
And
100%.
Yeah, it doesn't have to stop you from doing the next things. Like Linda also is saying, a specialist told her that in his opinion, he did not feel that I was right with God, so there was no point in treating me because it wouldn't make a difference. Right? I know. There's a lot of things wrong in that sentence. One is,
Wow.
Because, Apple. Apple said, I ignored a heart attack for a few days because I'd experienced worse pain and been dismissed by doctors, so I figured it was just another random pain experience. Medical gaslighting is terrible.
That's so bad.
And even Joanne's like, oh my God. Yeah, and I will say, a few months ago, I went to the emergency room. I wasn't having a bad pain, and it actually was really nothing. But what I want to tell you this because I had such a wonderful experience. And so I had a pain in my right side a little bit, and I thought it was a muscle. And then I had sat outside, and then all of a sudden it felt like it kind of migrated. And I thought that was weird. And then I was feeling dizzy. But spring came early, so it could have been pollen, but it was just all these things that I was like, well, it could be this, it could be that.
Your arm was having a pain.
Oh yeah, and my arm was a little bit numb, but I think it's because I was swelling from the allergies. So, but anyhow, so I went to urgent care, and they were lovely. They're like, we don't have the one test that I can do to tell you if you have a heart attack, go to the hospital. I was like, I am not going to the hospital. That's ridiculous. And then they're like, well, it's just down the road. And because we went to Hillsborough, which is a little bit out because it's a very clean, nice, rarely crowded urgent care, and I'm always like, let's go to the least crowded. And we went, and the hospital was lovely. The doctor I had, because they did several tests, they tried all kinds of things, and they were just lovely. And he's like, from the very beginning, he was like, I'm so glad you came. No matter what this is, you did exactly the right thing. Like, he affirmed me being there. Every time he came into the room, he made a point of saying it again. Because I was like, well, it's probably allergies. I probably didn't really need to come in. He's like, it's great that you did. And when I wrote up my little experience, afterwards, I told them how amazing that was, because I think I've heard so many stories about women, especially with heart attacks, being dismissed. And Patty Dye, who I had on, and Patty Dye, if you don't know her, you need to know her. She's awesome. But she had a widowmaker heart attack. So it's like her widowmaker artery was blocked. And she went to the doctor, and he's like, you're okay, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, I'm going to go to the hospital. And she had to have surgery. When she saw her doctor after that, he had like an intern or something, and he was explaining this stuff, and he goes, yeah, women can be very hysterical, so usually blah, blah, blah. And she's like, I was right, and I had surgery. So of course she fired him. But I can really understand, and I know sometimes that's my hesitation. My hesitation is always like, I probably don't need to go. right? Even if maybe I do need to go. So I'm 58 now. So I'm trying to make the decision to go because we have health insurance. There, a long time in my life I didn't. So I think doing all this crazy stuff that they did maybe cost us less than $100, right? So
Yeah.
why not go? Whereas when I didn't have insurance and I thought I was having an appendix attack, it was like almost $1,000 I had to try and pay off. So there's always that, but you don't know who you're going to get in those situations.
Yeah.
And how does that work with you and your illness?
That's why I have the binder, is because I think part of this is because I've been in tech my whole life and I'm just surrounded by dudes. It's all men. So my whole life, even though now, today it's not as bad as it used to be, still male dominated. And it is still that hysterical woman thing. I'm coming in and my entire job is to point out all the stuff that's wrong and make sure that we get ahead of it so that things don't break. And I'll come in with things and be like, I noticed this and this and this are all very wrong, and we have to fix that because that could be catastrophic. We got to do this, and we can't do this before we release and all this. And for a good amount of time, if I didn't preface it with evidence and I just said the thing, then it would be like, no, I'm pretty sure we're fine, thanks. But if a man walked in 5 minutes later and said the same thing, all of a sudden, oh my God, you're so right, we should really do that. So I've had plenty of that in my life, and I openly call it out, which they really, really hate when I do that live time.
I bet.
They really don't like it. But it's the same kind of thing with medical appointments where I start with the evidence. And I'll say, like, I understand that you may think that this could be this, and this is not this, and that this has to be this, and that I'm saying this because of this. I will tell you why those are not the things if you need me to validate it. Otherwise, why don't we move on to the symptoms? And I front load the conversation with, hi, I'm the expert, and go from there. Because that's the only way to get my foot in the door for most things. And it's the only way to get them to not to listen, but to actually hear me. Because if I just go in being like, I don't know, my head really hurts, then they're like, cool, I'll take some Advil. But if I go in and say, the nerve pain that was here and here last time, it was vagus nerve, but this time I think that blah, 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 and my head hurts, then they take it seriously. So like, it's so much work on my part, but it helps a lot. And I have much less frustrating conversations with people in the medical community, ER specialists, anything, because I come prepared with as much information as I can. And if it's written down, it's even better, because then they hand it off to the tech. And like most of the time, the tech is the one that will catch things. But it's like front loading. I'm the expert. I know myself. And not being uncertain in any way, shape, or form. Even if I have no clue what's going on, I just kind of fake it. And then they'll do the things that I need them to do to get me what I need. I don't know, fake it till you make it. Is that what that is?
You're not faking anything.
I mean, sometimes, because it does get you taken a little bit more seriously. Like sometimes I will exaggerate something to make the point. Like my arm will go numb for various reasons. Instead of saying it fell asleep an hour ago, I'll say it's been asleep all day. Because if I say it fell asleep an hour ago, they'll say, well, just give it a little time. And it's like, I know exactly what's happening right now. So if I stay here another 6 hours, then you would validate me. So I'm just going to get ahead of it. And I don't do it often, but when I have to, I will pull that trigger.
Well, and I think that's important because, if you're going there with your arm asleep and I'm going with mine, it's a different case scenario, right? Mine is not chronic, so therefore maybe I am panicking and maybe I need to wait another hour and everything's fine. So I can see
Well,
it
maybe
kind of
you
from
are
their.
having a stroke or a heart attack because it's not chronic. If that happens out of nowhere, like maybe that's a lot more serious.
That's true too. See, and you can see too, even just me talking, how I feel differently about my health and talking to doctors than I do talking about yours or all of y'all's. So, because I always try to be transparent about what I'm good at and not good at, and since I'm not super good at it, what I am good at that I do at doctors. So first, with primary care or anything like that, I try to get people I feel really good with. But even like when I got my liver biopsy, I made friends with everybody. And actually as soon as I get in, the woman who put in the little port in my arm came in and told them I was the patient of the day. Because I was like, she's like, oh, I'm like, ooh, I've never had one of those. This is a very special day. And she's like, I think they're just kind of like, wow, she's not being cranky and crazy. And I'm just like, let's just jab it in, get my liver out. I'm going. Because I could sit there and like really just be like, oh, I don't want this to happen. And I can't, for me personally, I can't do that. I can do anything for a short period of time is how I look at it. So I think when I go in, and the doctor and I were even joking, he's like, well, you could probably do it. And I'm like, it's my first time. Why don't you do it this time? And like, we're just having this happy time. And I felt like in the ER, I happened to get just really friendly nurses and funny. Like the one woman who came in, I swear she looked like she was like half witchy, moon goddess nurse. And she was joking with me and things. So sometimes I feel like having an open heart, open attitude can help, but there's still a lot of misogynistic doctors that are never going to listen to a woman. Though seeing what I saw, young doctors, it felt like they're really trying, at least where I got, they were trying to turn it around, and that gave me a lot of hope.
Yeah.
But
That is true. I wouldn't say that I have a preference. Well, no, you know what? I don't. I don't have a preference of gender, age. I don't care. If you know what you're doing, please help me. But there is something to say for making the sacrifice of 20 years of experience for 15 minutes of being willing to listen.
Well,
And that's a hard trade-off to make, but at least the person that listened, maybe they can get me with the person that has 20 years of experience.
that is exactly right. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important that your primary care person, and whatever that means to you. For me, that means a GP. For you, it could be a certain specialist, whoever is your go-to person. And if you don't have a go-to person, I would really encourage you to ask people around you and or people who have the same issues that you do. Because some people are funny about certain issues or change, in my case, change their practice. So that what was okay, 8 years ago when I was with her was no longer okay. She, eating oatmeal was not okay anymore, and we were going to have an issue with that, right? And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not going to be paleo. That's never going to happen. And also, in general, with your doctor, unless you're getting a special whole food plant-based doctor or something like that, they should be open to what works for you, right? I mean, sometimes we go to people because they have a similar view that we do and can work with us on that level. But in my opinion, other than here's some things you can do to eat healthier, in general, doctors aren't really trained very much on food either.
Yeah.
And
Which
even
is why they would be referring people to registered dietitians.
right. And even there, depending on where you're coming from, you may need to interview to find someone who fits with you.
Right. I've always joked that I want to start some sort of company that does doctor speed dating and just like
That's
It would
brilliant.
solve so many problems. Like if I could just get like 10 doctors on a call and spend 5 minutes with each one, fantastic. So I'd be like, nope, don't like you. Nope, don't like you.
And that is how Leslie is going to make her millions. Because I would pay to do that too. I mean, because sometimes you can find people who've been with certain doctors and sometimes you can't. And it's impossible. For me, it's impossible to tell by just recommendations because it's such a personality. Like you guys like hanging out with me and that's why you're here, like what, an hour and a half later, right? Because you like us. And so if you were going to give me a review, you're probably going to give me a good review. Whereas the people who left 2 minutes ago aren't going to give a review. Or the people who hate me will give me a review. The people who love me will give you a review, but not what normal people feel like. And I think that happens with doctors and I don't know. But I don't want to keep you that much longer because you are a busy, busy lady and you have the energy that you have, but I really want to thank you for coming on and just sharing your wisdom and struggles with everybody. I think everybody really related to what you were saying.
Oh, I really appreciate that. And I feel bad because I realized we really didn't talk about the kitchen at all.
You can come back and we can talk about the kitchen should you like to. And plant-based chats always kind of go where they go. And that's okay. And that's, Leslie had texted me and said, is there anything I need to prepare? And I was like, no, because we're just going to talk and it'll be fine. So hopefully we haven't worn you out too much, but you've given us so much valuable information. And I think if you don't already on Navigate and Advocate, you need to put up about your binder. Stuff.
Yeah, actually, it's one of the many posts in draft now. Because I'm trying. The thing that's tough with the medical stuff is making sure that it doesn't seem like I'm making recommendations for medications or any of that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to make sure like I'm blurring out the names of certain things and like it doesn't make it look like I'm saying this is what everybody should be doing. So there's more editing going into it than I had planned. So, but I also don't want it to be super generic because that's not helpful either. So it is the binder. I promise. This will be on the site somewhere relatively soon because I really want to get that out of my drafts.
And you guys, if you're feeling like this kind of information is helping you or you have a chronic illness or you're going to a lot of doctors, please do follow Leslie. And I think from Navigate and Advocate, it links to your TikTok so you can go through that way because, and then you will have another audience too of people who can support you and meet new people there as well. But thank you so much and you are welcome back anytime you would like to come and hang out with us.
Fantastic. Next time we can actually talk about food.
Well, have and Joanne says, thank you for being so open. I just hide it when my body isn't working right, but it's so scary when it's your mind. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad this was helpful to some people and like, it was just a pleasure to be on. I'm so glad that you invited me to do this.
That's all. Justine says, amazing talk. Kelly thanks you. 21st Century Homestead says, thank you so much for these beautiful conversations. Anne says, thank you both so much. And Linda says, thank you as well. So just know there's lots of heartfelt love pouring out towards you and feel that for the rest of your day.
That's awesome.
And if you guys,
thank you.
Oh, yay! That's awesome. So if you guys have some suggestions about other topics you want to hear about or people you want me to try and reach out to or other things you'd like Leslie to talk about, don't forget to let me know. And you can always email me at kathyhester@gmail.com. Have an amazing rest of your day and do at least one kind thing to yourself, okay? And I mean it. Don't make me get the teacher look, because I will. All right.
Or she's going to send me in to help her.
I know. I love it. Oh, and Apple says, thanks, Leslie. I live with ME and POTS too, and some other things. Oh. Thanks for sharing. So It was very important. Thank you, Leslie, and we really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys really soon, okay? Have a good